What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? Hopefully everyone's having a good day, a good week, enjoying the summer heat. Today we have on a good friend of mine, former Oregon offensive lineman, longtime NFL player. His brother played for the Kansas City Chiefs and won a Super Bowl in 2019. Geoff Schwartz, who covers the NFL and college football, who's very dialed in and just a fun all-around big guy. Love the offensive linemen. They bring a lot to the table. So today we will just have Geoff Schwartz on the show, talking a little ball, talking NFL, talking college, just kind of enjoying ourselves. But before we dive into Geoff, if you want to go to one of those football games in the fall, I wouldn't blame you. Do you want to go to a baseball game this summer? Do you want to get out and go to a concert? I see Justin Timberlake's playing. Looks like he's having a lot of fun. Well, if you do, my close friends, good partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time, has you covered. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, glad to have back on. We recorded a podcast last week. We had some issues, so I said, my man, you want to record it again? Geoff Schwartz, Oregon alumni, NFL, longtime NFL player. His brother also played in the NFL for a while. One of the royal families of the NFL, the Mannings, the Watts, the Bosas, and the Schwartz.
The Kelseys. You can't forget the Kelseys.
And the Kelseys.
I asked Mitch to do a podcast with me. He wouldn't do it. So, he and I basically, I retired 2016. It's been a while. When he was basically done playing in 2020, I was like, dude, let's start the podcast. Let's do it. Now we're probably never gonna be the Kelsey brothers. We're not as cool. And, obviously who Travis is dating certainly has helped that podcast skyrocket even more. But we were never going to be those guys. They're very, charismatic but I thought we could have some sort of successful podcast. You didn't want to do it. I tried, man. You didn't want to do it.
You know what's crazy is you were a 7th round pick. He was a 2nd round pick. You were a much bigger recruit coming out of high school than he was. Is that fair to say?
Well, it depends. I think I had probably bigger schools sort of on the West Coast recruit me.
Did Pete Carroll recruit you?
Yeah. So USC. So I was a 04 class of 04, and USC at that time was rolling, obviously. And they were actually the most honest. They were the most honest with me, them in Oregon, where I ended up going. USC told me that if I was not getting a scholarship offer, and that I had to wait to see if someone else committed. If that person did not commit, John, they'd give me the offer. And at that time, look, my parents are UCLA alumni. I went to Bruin games as a kid. I despised USC. I would have gone to USC. They're number 1 in the country. You just go. USC couldn't offer players like they do now because they would commit immediately. If they offered me, I'd be like, yes, I'm coming. Yes. I'm like, no. Don't take the offer. I'm coming right now. Just run down there, right? It's USC, of course. And so they told me they were waiting for another player to commit. That player committed about mid-October, and they let me go. And Ed Orgeron called me every Monday at 7:20 without fail. And eventually they're like, yeah, I think it was Jeff Byers, who was Gatorade Player of the Year in Colorado that year. He went to NFL for a little bit. And so, yeah, I didn't make it to USC. But I probably would have gone if they asked me to. That's how big they were. My brother was being recruited by a lot of the academic schools, like Virginia was one of them. Cal, obviously, Stanford. He was, and so continues to be obviously very, very bright. It was a different era back then too, right? That was the beginning. When my time was the beginning of the camps, right? You didn't go to camp. I went to a USC camp, a UCLA camp. There weren't these big rivals camps, and Elite 11 was kind of slowly starting at that time as well for the quarterbacks and skill guys. It's a different time, but Mitch he had more national based schools after him, a lot for his academics and his play. I had, a lot of regional schools. I had schools. It's funny. I had schools call me, and they would be like, "Look, man, I know you're not coming here, but if you want to, just call us back." Like there were some schools that, I think Arizona State was one of them. They were just like, "Hey, we like you. Like we take you. You're probably not coming here, but if you want to, just like call us back and you can commit to Arizona State."
When I got to Fresno State, I don't even know if this is still allowed. For like 3 or 4 days, we would have a high school camp where they would be in full pads. And like, I swear to God, like 15 schools came. Bishop Gorman, who became a powerhouse in Vegas. And it was pretty incredible. You would like offer guys, sign guys. Obviously, there were also some highly touted guys, but it would be full on jamborees and scrimmages. I'm pretty sure that does not exist anymore. But like when your brother went to Cal, I mean, if you're a young, in your early 20s, Cal's been pretty bad for a while. They were really good when you were in college under Tedford, like loaded with, they had every bit as the NFL talent as your teams in Oregon did.
Oh, absolutely. Even now, Cal, I look, I haven't looked in a couple of years, but Cal was like top 10 for just NFL players. Like they've had a lot of NFL players go through, and it's also too like when you Cal very well. I know Cal, like it's odd that they had characters like Marshawn Lynch and Deshaun Jackson there. You're like, that doesn't really fit like how Cal is, let's just say. But they've had so many talented players. I mean, I played against Brandon Mebane, who was a D tackle who played 10 years NFL. I didn't play against Cam Jordan, but he's still in the NFL. Who's going to be a Hall of Fame pass rusher, I would imagine. I mentioned Marshawn Lynch and Deshaun Jackson and Aaron Rodgers, obviously. Javid Best and Shane Vereen. Alex Mack played offensive line for so many years. Like they've had these guys that
Keenan Allen, your brother.
Really, oh, you're right. Yeah, Keenan Allen was there. I mean, they've had so many players over the years come out of that program. Jared Goff, who's still kicking ass, right? I mean, two Super Bowl appearances.
And he was a Tedford recruit, and then he got
at the very
fired.
end. Yeah, at the very end. Yeah. And they just have never won quite that way with all the pro talent they had. Their offensive lines, when I was there, the offensive lines were good. I mean, they had multiple guys a year ago in the NFL.
By the time this plays, it'll probably be a week plus away from the Rory choke job. But I was thinking about choke jobs in football, and you and I are basically the same age. When we were young, before Payton won the Super Bowl, I was a big Manning fan. It felt like he got a little tight, and he was basically the offensive coordinator too.
Yeah.
But like last year, the Ravens, I mean, they choked that. But to me, it was as much on like Todd Monken was pretty awful in that game, equally as Lamar. And you go back to when the Bills choked that 13 seconds. I think in football, when you choke, I mean, Kyle Shanahan still wears the Atlanta Falcons 28-3. It's like almost more on the coaches or as much on the coach or the play caller as much as it is on the players. Where in the NBA, if you choke, it's kind of on the player, right? Or baseball screw up. Like in football, do you think that's fair? Like the coach bears a lot of brunt there?
I was actually thinking about this in different sports the other day after the Rory thing, because, it's such an individual sport, obviously, right? That in golf that you can very clearly see the failures and who they're on, right? And in basketball, again, people have the ball in their hand. You go to this Mavs, Celtics series, like Kyrie just didn't play well. He didn't choke, but it's very clear to see like Kyrie, I don't think they win the title anyways, but Kyrie basically no-showing 3 games in Boston doesn't help you win. Like it's very clear to see. And I think
they wouldn't have been in the finals if he had played like that all the playoffs.
No chance. I mean, he had 60 points, him and Luka combined, some nights in the Western Conference Finals. And also too, I think that a lot of us don't exactly know the importance of a basketball coach or a baseball manager. Football coach, it feels very obvious to see the influence they have on a game. Whether it's play calling, whether it's, Mike Tomlin just having his team each and every year ready to play every game, right? Like you see the effect a coach has, where I think in the NBA, the Boston Celtics coach was mocked, John, for like 18 straight months. And then and like the last 3 months are like, oh, he sort of figured it out. Even Boston fans are like, I don't know if this guy's the guy. You would never, in the NFL, if coach made a Super Bowl, you would be like, I don't know, man. You might not be, you'd be like, hell yeah, good job, coach.
He'd get a huge extension. He'd be making $15 million a year.
Yes. And so It's just different. So I think when you look at choke jobs, it certainly feels like it's an NFL team. Look, I've been on the side of that in 2013 where Kansas City, we were up 38-10 in the third quarter of a playoff game. And no one blames the players. Everyone just blames Andy Reid. Like it's Andy Reid's fault. And so, Andy Reid had that tag for a long time too, right? Couldn't win the big game, choked in those moments. Here's why I think, at least offensively, I think what happens in a lot of these moments, right, John? Coaches get paid on the offense side of the ball to pass the football. No one gets, the only one I think right now in the NFL who gets paid to like run the ball is Kyle Shanahan. No one else wants to, right? Like they get paid as an OC, as a head coach because of their offensive play designs to pass the ball down the field. And when things get a little tight in games, what do you do? What do you do in life when things get difficult? You go back to what you know, right? And so when things get difficult in games, coaches go back to what they know. They throw the football. Like in 2013 in that Chiefs game, we're up 38-10. All we had to do, John, was run the football, I think, every play the second half, and we win that game. Like, there's no doubt about it.
Who was your running back?
So Jamal Charles got hurt in that game, and then our backup got hurt. So on our third string running back, we were still averaging a good amount on the ground. We're moving guys off the ball, but we passed the ball too much. There was a strip sack. Like it went downhill fast. And I think when the Ravens specifically in that game, the Chiefs scored 14 points really fast.
Yeah.
And I think they thought to themselves like, oh shit, we got to keep up. If we don't keep up. And he just got into this mode where like, we got to pass the ball. It's like, no, the Chiefs pass defense is good. Run the football. And I think coaches at times get sort of go back to what they know, which is most often on offense is passing the football. And that's what happens to a lot of coaches in those moments. And again, in the NBA, it's hard to tell. Like, I don't think it was Jason Kidd's fault the Mavs lost. Like,
no,
it's not his fault that Kyrie didn't play well. It's not his fault. PJ Washington basically, like, really, anyone outside of Luka, right? Like, it's not. Is it Kidd's fault that Luka didn't play defense? No. Like, so that's why I think it's so hard to pin that on baseball managers and basketball coaches.
Well, you've been around these coaches on game day. In my experience, I'm around them during the week, but on game days, I'm sitting in a box or whatever. And obviously now what I do. The Ravens game's a good example. And I had a buddy that was on the Ravens staff who's now somewhere else in the league, said that he's like, he loves Lamar because obviously this year, I mean, he played fucking Lamar and that defense. They were awesome. It was like we were playing Tiger Woods. He birdies the first couple holes and then Lamar starts pressing. But he's like, all Munkin had to do the previous game, Josh Allen ran wild on the Chiefs.
Yep.
Right? It's like, and then remember there was an early like 4th and 1 where Lamar busted one for 25. Yep. It's like, just let him run. But then they just kept calling pass plays and you could tell Lamar got tight. He didn't play well, but like that to me is on Munkin as much as any. Do you feel these coaches, like, could you sense a coach get tight in the way he's calling a game or even his mannerisms on the sideline in the college or pros?
I've never felt that as a player. Now, I think there are times when as a player, I've thought to myself, like, that's a bad play call.
Which is human nature.
Like there's certainly times I've been in the huddle like that. Okay, sure. We'll run that play. It ain't going to work. And it wasn't with Andy Reid or like, with Tom Coughlin and other coaches I play with where I'm like, holy heck, that's just a dumb play. It's not going to work. But I don't think I've ever felt that coaches in the moment have sort of called a bad game or because you look as a player, you have confidence that everything's going to work outside the few times I mentioned. And so you never think to yourself in that moment, like, man, they screwed up. Plus two, as an offensive lineman, you don't during the game, you're not privy to like the coverages teams are playing for the most part. I know like where the safeties are pre-snap, but I'm not paying attention. Oh, is this cover 3, cover 2? Is this quarters or 6 or 8 or whatever? Like I'm not paying attention.
It doesn't matter to you.
A little bit it matters to me, but not a lot. But then like on Mondays, we're watching film. It's like the offensive line coach would throw a dig, like cover 3, man. Like we have an answer. We just didn't do it, guys. I'm sorry. Like that type of thing. Like you don't know sort of like in the moment, whether or not coach is quote unquote choking it away. And you learned a lot of that on Mondays.
What's the loudest you've ever been yelled at?
Oh man. Okay. I'll tell you the story. So, I don't think I ever told a story before. John Matsko was our offensive line coach 1 year with the Panthers in 2011. He stayed for a long time. He's actually a really good offensive line coach, which makes sort of the way he is sometimes Interesting. But he was big into like he liked to fight. He's an old school coach. He coached in the Rams, the Super Bowl winning fastest show on turf Ram. He's coached a long time in the NFL, John. And he's old school guy. He liked to fight in practice. Like that was his thing. Like he wanted like one a day, right? And I'm not a big fight guy. I've been in a couple of them, but I wasn't playing well, all right, in camp. And I ended up having a back injury that we found out a couple weeks later. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna start a fight today to get on my coach's good side. Okay, so start a fight. It goes like a fight does, whatever. And like you could tell like afterwards he was like, "Attaboy, Schwartz, like good job, okay." And we get to the meeting room, and you know this on film. Maybe you have different film than we get because you might get a different cut than we get as a scout, but they don't show the fights on film. They don't do that, right? At practice.
Yeah, the play ends and they cut
the play ends and they cut it.
Yeah.
So all you see on this play is I'm blocking the linebacker as Dan Connor, a good buddy of mine who, when I played with the NFL, we drafted the same year, and I take him and after play, like I shove him late, right? Like very clearly, like F you, like let's get after it. I turn around to walk away. He shoves me in the back and the film cuts off. Now everyone knew that we started a huge fight. It happened. Well, Matsko, for some reason, man, he cussed me out. Like I've never been cussed out in my entire life because he said I didn't fight him. He didn't see that fight in me. And I was like, I was so angry because he clearly knew I fought him. He saw it happen. He was calling me all sorts of names. And I was like in the point of tears. I was so angry, John, because like I did what you wanted me to do. I fought. I don't ever do this. I did it to get on your good side. And then afterwards, he did the thing where he's like, "Hey, Schwartz, stay after the meeting." Okay. And he pulls me aside. He goes, "I know you fought that guy. I just did that for effect for like the rest of the room." I was like, "What the, bro, what are we doing?" So I got cussed out for something that I didn't even do wrong. I fought the guy. I did what he asked me to do. Otherwise I never got like cussed out like that much personally. I think I played in the NFL for so long. I played 8 years. I was hurt a bunch. And a lot of guys in my 7th round pick don't play as long as I did with all the injuries. Unless you're like a good teammate, right? Unless you're a guy that can be trusted in the locker room, a guy that coach can put you in. Look, I wasn't the best player, John, but I didn't make the coach look stupid, right? Like so the coaches never had a reason to yell at me. Like, yeah, coaches get angry and but you give up a sack or had a mental error, but like that wasn't my game. I didn't make mental errors. I might've gotten beat. That happens, right? It's football, but I never gave a coach a reason to really cuss me out. Like there was never a point where like they felt they had to say that to me. And I was you could talk to me. Like we can have conversation. You don't have to cuss me out. I get your point if you just talk. So I think coaches sort of it never got to a point where I ever had to be yelled at that way. And the one time I got yelled at that way, I actually did what I was supposed to do, which was the guy pushed me late and we started a fight in practice.
That's what I think's the hard part about the draft season for so many people that talk about it. Like having seen both sides, and listen, I love talking about it as much as the next guy. But unless you know the wiring of the guy, like that is such a huge factor because most teams, like most players in the NFL aren't doing things like Deebo Samuel or Tyreek. Like most of the players are just solid guys, like solid starters. Yeah. And the intelligence, how coaches, gravitate towards you, how you act, just like, are you easy? I don't need to worry about you, is something that never gets talked about on the outside and gets talked about all the time on the inside.
Yeah, I mean it's I actually asked a college coach this recently, like how do you recruit these kids? Because it's a different time now with college kids. He said exactly what you said. He goes, I try to understand who they are because I need a certain type of guy in my team. And that's the hardest part is figuring out who the player is outside of football. I can watch all these highlights. I know who they are as a player on the field. But how do I figure out if they're going to fit in my locker room? How am I going to figure out if they're going to be able to fight and battle and claw and do things I have to do or I have to get them to do to win a championship? And yeah, like you don't know the makeup. But I will say, I mean, all the background stuff now these guys do. I mean, I feel like they sort of know, right? I mean, they
have a pretty good idea.
I mean, and there's I think you might have been in Philly when Watkins was drafted, right? The offensive lineman.
Yeah,
like
we had
hard.
bad intel on that one.
Yeah, but John, like I think it's just hard to know. Like it's really like I think as much as you try to know, guys come in the league, and it's hard to play professional sports. And some guys they just break. It is what it is. And you might think and then you don't. And but I certainly think I always tell like young players, like my advice is to basically just be liked. Like make sure that people in the building like you, because that does go a long way. And people in the NFL talk. Like if you're a fringe player and they like you, you might stick around a little bit longer, or they tell someone else that, and if you're an asshole and you can't play football, like you're out of there immediately. No one, there are guys, there's players now that when you think to yourself, like, why is that player not signed? They need enough money. I don't know, it's just personality. They don't like their personality.
I think that's like good life advice. I would even add, be liked and try hard. Like if people feel like you're giving everything you have and trying hard and you're well liked, like obviously you have, to get to the NFL, you have to have the talent, but you're going to stick around longer than the guy. Yeah, we kind of like him and we don't even think he's working very hard because, like this time right now, right? Most teams have give or take 40 days off. Yeah. Like I would imagine most, especially veteran guys, younger players, who knows, but like Christian McCaffrey's working out today. Yes. Right. Patrick Mahomes, like TJ Watt, yeah. I mean, this is very, very serious how you approach this.
Well, John, I find it so funny. I think guys are doing it less and less now, but you see players be like rise and grind in the offseason. I'm like, buddy,
Russell Wilson used to do that.
Your job is just to work out. Like, it ain't that hard. It ain't that deep. Like, get your 2-hour workout in, get your recovery in, eat right today, and do it again tomorrow. Like, I'm like, your job is your body. Like, this is our job, right? You're supposed to work out. You're supposed to eat well. Let's take care of yourself. Yeah, you can party a little bit. You can enjoy the life that you've created for yourself, but it's not that deep. It's not like rise and grind and like I'm in the factory at 6 a.m. Like, that's your actual job. That's your job. Like, can you imagine if you were like rise and grind, got to record a podcast? That's your job, is to record a podcast. It's not like a special. Yes, our job is to make sure that we train to play football, and it does take a couple of years to figure out what that path is, right? A lot of, as a young player, you feel great as a young player. You don't think you need any help, and but as you get older, you figure out your path. You find a trainer you like, a workout facility. You find a nutritionist you like, or some sort of meal program. You find a rehab person you like, and but you have to put in the work, right? I mean, I think a lot of players figure that out as they go, because I think a lot of us, when we're young, like you think and then you have a year or you have a game when you just get your butt kicked and you figure out like, oh, that doesn't work. I got to try something else. And the guys that adapt the best figure it out.
Get ready for a night full of big fights and big action. It's UFC 303, and it could be even bigger. Jump in on all the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC. Super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting something simple, like picking a fighter to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your fighter, and place your first bet. Really that simple. The lightweight heavyweight title is on the line in the main event, but there are so many more amazing matchups happening in Vegas. And speaking of amazing, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet just $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN, that's code JOHN, for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets. When you bet just $5. Get that big night feel. Only on DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Heard you tell this story before, but obviously you played for Andy Reid. Your brother played for him for a long time. Is like after a win or a loss, all these stories about Belichick, the way he handles his meetings, cussing guys out and just being – Andy is, would you say, pretty consistent and normal and not a huge overreactor, win or lose any game?
Dude, it's 1-minute team meetings. It's like the absolute best. He has a note card. I have a note card here. He just has a note card. He just like picks it up and he goes.
Did that in Philly too.
That's it. Like he reads off. He's like, all right, guys, well, we lost. Got to play better next time. Talk to your coaches about it. Okay, we got practice in an hour. Tomorrow's off. Make sure you get your body worked on. All right, ready, break. Like, that's it. That was it. The longest meeting we ever had was the first one of training camp, which is like the compliance meeting. Yeah. And then that was it. Like, and that's what I think players appreciate about Andy Reid. There's a lot of things players appreciate, but it's the consistency, which the way he handles his business, right? And I think he treats us like, it sounds cliche, but like professionals, right? Like, we know we lost. Like we know we lost, John. No one wants to lose. Losing sucks. No one. That's the worst thing that can happen in the building, right? Like everyone in the building is affected when you lose, from the lowest person at the entire organization to the general manager, the ownership. Like everyone in that building is depressed for days if you lose. Like it stinks to lose. We know that. We know that we have played poorly or someone made a mistake. Like there's no point in. And look, there's different ways. Obviously, the Belichick way worked for so many years. But it only works, by the way, if you win. If you lose and you act like that, you lose your locker room immediately. But Andy Reid was just very consistent with that message, right? Like we're going to work. I think a misconception about Andy Reid is that he works the players, man. It's a little bit different now when different rules for training camp and different rules for practice. But this, man, when I got signed by the Chiefs in 2013, we didn't have double this. I got a call from a couple Eagles I knew, and they're like, "Be ready, buddy. Be ready for training camp." I'm like, "What do you mean be ready?" He goes, just be ready for training camp. And this is with single practices. And I was like, and I got there, had a couple of them, like, I text those guys like, "Yep, you were right." Like, and it's after he still live tackles in practice and training camp, which, like, can you imagine if Kyle Shanahan live tackled in practice? Like, you would, these guys, no, Andy Reid does goal line live tackling drills in training camp. There's a reason why their team starts fast every season. Like because they hit in training camp. He plays his starters in the preseason, which some coaches would think is the dumbest thing of all time. But he's very consistent on who he is. He sticks to his word about what he tells us he's going to do, and players really appreciate him for that.
Yeah, I think the misconception, obviously, people love him, players coach in the sense that he's relationships with guys. But when it comes to practice, the other thing is if you're on the fence, injured or not, like you better be practicing. That is kind of where they separate, not in the, like Tom Coughlin, who obviously is a very successful coach. His meeting after a loss a little different vibe.
Oh yeah, he had longer team meetings though. His were like 30 minutes long, so it was always a little different. He would sort of like go through the game and we'd show plays and whatnot of bad things that happened, and he didn't individually kind of call out players like Belichick. Like that's a very Belichick thing, like to individually call out players. And everyone's heard stories about those locker rooms. In those meetings. But Coughlin was fire. He had long team meetings, like 30 minutes. He did on Wednesdays, but his game plan day. He basically was in charge of doing the full scouting report. He got up in there and told us everything about the team we were playing. Where again, Andy Reid left a lot of that to his position coach, which is probably why a lot of his coaches are good NFL head coaches, John, because he gave him a lot of responsibilities to do that other coaches just don't give their coaches. Coughlin, dude, he's just so different than he is to the media. Like behind the scenes, man, just most coaches are, but it's very striking with Coughlin. Like you would hear him talk to the media, and then he talk to the team, and then you meet with him individually. It was just so different. I loved it. It was that kind of side that you only saw in the locker room.
Isn't it funny that leading up to the draft, everyone's like, Chargers, wide receiver. It's like, guys, have you followed this man's career? Like, do you understand? Like, they had 4 guys to make decisions on. They figured out a way to keep the 2 D linemen and got rid of the 2 wide receivers. Jim Harbaugh is a quarterback who thinks he's like a hybrid linebacker, pass rusher, offensive lineman. He doesn't talk or operate like a quarterback. I go back and forth. Like, obviously they have high-end guys that get injured a lot, even with Mac's been a little more consistent, but Joey Bosa. If they keep those guys, I do wonder if they're going to be, are they a playoff team? Because clearly he wants to take a little pressure off Justin. I don't know if their running game is going to be good enough to do what he wants to do this year, but they are clearly going to be a lot better.
They're going to be better because they're going to just be way more structured. Like they're going to have structure about the way they play. I felt like Staley at times. I know you're not the biggest fan of Staley either. Like it just felt very unstructured, right? Like sort of just guessing on those 4th downs. Like there was no rhyme or reason to some of his decisions. And Harbaugh's going to have a structure to what he does. He's going to have a reason for everything. And part of playing for Harbaugh is trusting him because he's won. Like he's won everywhere. He won at San Diego. He won at Stanford. He won it with the 49ers. He won at Michigan. And so there's a trust factor there with knowing that whatever he tells you is going to work because it has in the past. The thing about the draft, people have to understand this sometimes, is you sometimes have to look at the first round pick through the lens of the rest of the draft, right? So for the Chargers, it was either like Alt and McConkey, whoever was there, sort of top of round 2, or like Neighbors and the next best tackle in the end of the first, the top of the second round. The next best tackle was not very good at that point. Like the tackles went in the first round, then not again until the third round. They're all gone. So like getting Joe Alt and McConkey is better than Neighbors and whoever you might get at the top of the second round. Like you have to look at the draft sometimes the way that teams have the board stacked up, right? So, and two, the wide receiver position now, you can find guys all through the draft, like 5th round, 6th round, 4th round, 3rd round. Offensive line for the most part is a top round guy. Like Joe Alt, you're not finding any Joe Alt in the 3rd round. You're not. So it makes sense to go offensive line there. And I think they're going to be just more consistent, but you're playing the AFC is just so tough, man. Like it feels tough for them to get maybe a 7 seed, 6, 7 seed at best.
Probably got to win 11 games.
They are, you think?
No, I'm saying you probably got to win 11 to feel good about your playoff chances.
Yeah, and I probably don't think they're there in year 1. I certainly think in year 2 and 3 and 4 moving forward, they're just going to be again a lot more consistent.
My thing with Alt and just tackles in general, and you and I text about this, guys that are that tall, it can be difficult. But I texted with a buddy who was drafted in the top 10, and they worked him out. He's like, I'm telling you, this guy's so athletic, and Ben, we don't think it's an issue at all. And to me, if Harbaugh loves him, maybe just this individual doesn't bother me as much.
Yeah.
Probably falls under more Colton Miller, tall guy, but such a good athlete. And this guy's a better player coming out of college than Colton Miller, clearly.
Yeah, the tall thing is sort of interesting. My buddy Duke Manyweather, who trains offensive lineman, best guy in the country to do so in Dallas. He talks about like hip height rather than just like overall height of the player, right? Like at what hip height do they play at, right? So like, are they, because that obviously means a lot. We hear like waist bender, knee bender, right? So like just hip height. If a guy and Joe Alt plays when he plays, his hips are at a good height for his body size. He's not too high. He's not too low.
Who cares where his helmet is?
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't matter. The thing about big, tall players like him too, that it's really tough for evaluators. And I had this conversation with people as well, is like, when you're that big, you're not explosive on film. You're just not. His arms and legs are so long that he's not going to be a violent puncher. That's not who he is. And even think about the tallest players, like Colton Miller is not a violent puncher type of guy. Even a guy like John Ogden, like guy's 6'9", he wasn't a guy when you watch him play and you're like, that guy punches a hole through a guy. He was like just
Larry
like,
Allen or something.
Yeah, he just was like, boom, like when his hands were on you, like you were done, right? And so Alt is not going to be a guy when you watch him play and think like, man, that's an explosive puncher, because he's too long to be that explosive. But he is though, right? He tested well. He's really good at run blocking. Like he's going to be a good football player for them. And I think for the Chargers too, like you look at, you're now set at both your tackle spots for 12 years. That's a big benefit to know that you have with Slater and with Alt now, that position is no longer one you have to worry about. That's a big bonus for them.
There is some projection though, when you take a guy, like he's a lifetime, and different footwork on different sides. Some guys, like the dude at Oregon State, put him anywhere. Some guys have played multiple positions. This guy's a lifetime left tackle.
Yeah.
And I can imagine in so far in OTAs, they've moved him at right tackle. I guess Slater's done both. He did both in college, right?
Yes, he played right tackle in college.
So you at least in the back of your mind know. And obviously, like if you ask Trent Williams to play right tackle, I'm sure he'd be fine. Like obviously there are guys that can do it that haven't done it. But there is just risk involved whenever you do that. And I'm not specifically talking about Alt, just in general when you kind of think like that with left and right tackles, right?
Oh, I think so. And there are guys that just can't do it. Like I could not play left guard, right tackle, not a problem. Like left guard, the left side, just couldn't do it. There are guys that do it much easier. They're able to just figure it out. The thing that I think you would look toward with Alt is his athleticism is top notch, right? So you in theory can move him over there. But he also has not played a lot of football, right? His dad specifically did not want him to play football. And then he realized, like, at some point, like, I got to let him play. Like, he's still relatively new to playing football. So he's played left tackle since he was, 13 years old. He
senior in high school.
He sort of like grew into that position. So I think you can make the case that there's a lot of room for him to go. I would not move Rashawn Slater, by the way. Like, you have an all-pro left tackle, like leave him as an all-pro left tackle and then just sort of figure out, and look, when you have you got like Slater too, John. You could put all the right tackle and then help him out. Like you left tackle's done with. Help the right tackle out. You give him chips, give him tight ends, give him formational help, and you don't have to worry about now Slater's playing a new position. Now Alt's a rookie, and just leave Slater where he is. Be set at left tackle, and then just help out the rookie at right tackle.
You know, Trent and Lane are older, but who would you say like under 30, 28 is the best tackle in the NFL?
Oh, Penei Sewell. That's not. I don't think it's even a question. He is going to be he's my guy, obviously from Oregon, but he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all like it's the way he's going right now, John. I mean, he just turned 23, or he's going to turn 24 during the season, I think, which is why he won the Outland Trophy at 18 years old.
Jesus,
he's 20. He's 23 right now.
That's pretty crazy.
He won the Allen Trophy. Part of that year, he was 18 years old because he turned 19, I think, in 2019. He came in the NFL. His third year is already an All-Pro in his third season. He's a two-time Pro Bowler. Like he's just going to be good forever because that's what he is as a player. So he's the guy to me that you look up and, it's 2030 and he's made the all-pro team for 7 straight seasons. And I think right tackles have historically not been Hall of Famers. I think actually with PFF helping to give context and stats to offensive line play, we're going to see Lane Johnson for sure is going to be a Hall of Famer. Willie Anderson should get in. He hasn't been in yet. But we're going to now see, I think, more right tackles get a chance to be Hall of Famers, where that really has never been the case before. There's a couple in there, but for the most part, it had to be left tackle.
Penei Sewell just got $85 million guaranteed and $112 million. He's making.
Oh, dude, he's going to be up for a second contract by 27.
Like that's pretty wild. You're a big Oregon guy, and after Bo Nix and everyone had a take, I just went and watched. I mean, obviously, you watch every game, and I watch the majority of Oregon games, but just went back and watched some cut-ups on YouTube. Actually kind of reminded me a little bit, if you went way back to like when Jimmy was coming out, or even Derek at Fresno State, like the athleticism, the accuracy, but the offense was, it's not what he's going to run specifically in the pros. But looking back, those guys, Derek, we could argue about him all day long, but Jimmy, when he was younger, was a really good player. Like, I think Bo Nix is going to probably be pretty good for Sean Payton.
So my comp for Bo Nix was like a more athletic Derek Carr, which might bother people, but that's sort of what I thought about him. The one thing about Nix that I think is the misconception, it's really two things, but tie into one is this idea of like he checks down all the time. There was a stat I saw, like he had 1,000 yards of passing yards of balls behind the line of scrimmage, essentially. And I went back and looked, and five plays total accounted for 20% of that number. And 2 of them were actually run plays that were considered pass plays because where the ball was handed off. And one was like a 75-yard screen. Like that's not his fault, like he can't do anything about it if a guy runs for 75 yards. So a lot of those numbers can be misleading. The Oregon passing attack, when it's just a regular passing attack, when it's an out of play action, out of sort of at times the RPO stuff, it's actually very pro style. There's a lot of West Coast concepts to what they do. If you watch kind of intently on sort of, they form that triangle when you throw. So like there's always kind of a 3-read triangle for him. A lot of there's a lot of empty stuff too, which he'll have to do in the NFL, which he was very comfortable with. But I don't see that like Caleb Williams upside, right? Like I think that's the hard part about drafting these quarterbacks. You're sort of stuck, right? Like you need a young quarterback. Bo Nix, if he's Derek Carr, you're probably happy about his career until you get tired of sort of not winning, I think, to the level you want to win at. And that's hard because, Caleb Williams, I think, is going to be incredible. And Bo Nix is just not going to ever be quite that good. And that's just sort of how it goes with the quarterback position. I think Bo Nix is going to be good, but he's never going to be a Pro Bowler, probably not. I mean, feels unlikely.
To me, the reality, too, is when these guys evaluated, and Andy told me when they did Mahomes and Sean Payton, I watched an interview, he said this, we just, out of our cut-ups, we just remove those passes. Like we don't want that pass behind the line. So people are like, well, he throws. Yeah, we don't care. As long as he's hitting those guys we know accurately, it's fine. Like, we're not evaluating those plays. Like,
Correct.
so it's like, we're not like, yeah, we understand he can throw behind the line of scrimmage, which you're going to need to do sometimes in the pros. Maybe not all that play, but wheel routes, check downs. Like, you do need to be accurate on that play. Why do a lot of players, bust? Obviously, they struggle down the field not reading stuff, but they get frazzled and then they fuck up the layup.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how many players have we seen with like sweet traits that, like, once they get frazzled, they have to dump it down to their running back or airmailing it to the trainer?
Yeah. And like their foot, what's all footwork, right? Their footwork on the back foot, and they're just not. I mean, there were plays Bo Nix made where there was one against USC at a touchdown where sort of everyone just cleared out, and he's like, "Cool, I'll throw the running back. No one's gonna like that." That's a smart decision. And he's not Patrick Mahomes, obviously, but Mahomes has gotten better because he's decided to take those layups. Like, he's like, "Cool, you want to give me 4 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards? I'll take it. Great." Now he can make special plays that Bo Nix will never be able to make. But Nix is not. I think Nix is going to be a better pro than Michael Penix, for example. That doesn't mean he's going to be, again, an all pro, but I think he'll be very serviceable for many years.
Well, I think the Atlanta Falcons are like, I think that's got disaster written all over it. Ton of pressure. Cousins coming off the injury, the weird Penix thing, everything. And I told you this last time we talked, everyone's picking them to win the division. I'm just strictly not. Partly out of like, everyone's doing it, everyone's hanging a left, I'm going to hang a right. But also, this team has been winning 7 games for 3 straight years. We hype up their talent, and they didn't just hire Vrabel or, Tomlin got fired and they hired him. Like, a guy that, okay, we know he knows what he's doing. Raheem Morris, well-liked, clearly a solid defensive coordinator, awesome to have on your staff. We have no clue what he's going to be as a head coach.
Yeah.
None.
I think
the division's not great, but, and I'm not saying they're going to suck, but it will not shock me if all of a sudden we look up and, Bucks are 10-7 and they're 9-8 or 8-9. They've missed the playoffs.
Well, I make a rule to never bet on the Falcons for anything, because I lose every wager anytime I ever want to bet on the Falcons for anything. I think it's John. It's mostly about just division not being great, but Tampa Bay returns a lot. They won the division last year, if I'm correct, right? Like they're not a bad football team. They're not winning. They're not winning a Super Bowl, but they're not a bad football team. The Panthers should be better just by default of, I think, just different coach and different players. I'm not high on the Saints for the reasons I'm not high on teams. I don't love the coaching. I don't love the quarterback. But the Falcons, the thing with Michael Penix is, people talk about distractions. Like, what is a distraction in the locker room? A distraction is sort of as simple as put, like, it's anything that takes away from the preparation of your game every week. And when Cousins has a bad game, which he's going to do at some point, Monday morning, going to have open locker room, John. People are going to walk up to Kyle Pitts and say, should Michael Penix be playing? Is there a quarterback change? They're going to ask Morris. Is Cousins going to keep a job? Like, that's a distraction, John, when you're talking about something that has nothing to do with winning or losing during that current week. And that's the thing with Penix. And it's just, the Falcons' reasoning was right. Like, if everything goes well, we just don't have to play him for 4 or 5 years. Then why'd you draft him with the first? You have other holes on your team. It doesn't feel like it's going to end up going well for them.
See, to me, that's the crazy part about college football. Because, like, now with the transfer portal, at least in the NFL, like, guys aren't in a contract, kind of stuck when things aren't going well. In college, it's like, I'm out. There's some of these locker room dynamics. It's easy if you're rolling like Ohio State or Georgia or Bama. But the majority of teams, even the good teams like LSU, 9-3 teams, you get some rocky times, throughout the year where guys like, fuck it, I'm going to go to Ohio State next year. It's got to be pretty wild internally.
I don't know how these college coaches do it, man. I don't know how they do it. Because I have friends, all over the spectrum, right? From, obviously, I'm close with the Oregon staff, but knowing guys at other Power 5 schools, knowing a couple coaches on the G5 level. It's about more than anything else right now, like money, John, right? Like, can you have an NIL program that keeps players around? Because as soon as someone plays well, they're getting tampered with, right? They're getting talked to behind the scenes, and people are trying to poach these guys, and you want to be able to keep them. And so, do you have the money to keep these players. I think the money is far less than we think it is. I don't really, I know numbers get reported out, and there's certainly a Jaden Rashada, number and lawsuit. That's not, I think a lot of players are dealing with.
Is that the fakest number? Like you should have red flagged that. Someone in his dad be like, this can't be real.
Yeah. The other one that people have mentioned is the one for Nico, the quarterback of Tennessee. It was like $8 million. Like, I know what guys at Oregon were sort of getting last year. It wasn't $8 million. I mean, it's a lot. So these coaches, the difficult part, I think, for coaches is basically designing a practice plan and a reps plan to keep players from transferring, because you have to basically make sure, John, that players feel like they're going to play. The thing about the portal too is we talk about the high end talent. Certainly there's high end talent everywhere, and those are going to certain schools, but the portal is not good because for your team, I mean, for the most part, you need depth on your team, right? If your depth pieces are transferring out, then that's a huge problem for you. And so you have to design a practice plan, all position coaches, to make sure that players feel like they have a chance to play when they don't have a chance to play. And it's a different dynamic. When I was going through, when you were with Pat Hill at Fresno State, they didn't give a shit. Oh, you suck. You're not going to get any reps at practice. Like, who cares? You're not going anywhere. But now you can't treat players like that, because they're just going to pack them and go to the portal, and you need to have a 2 deep to be competitive. Your third string guy leaves, like, whatever, who cares? So that's the hard part about the portal for the coaches is, and I think that's why a lot of coaches are just like, I'm out of here, right? Like, I don't want to deal with older coaches. I just don't want to deal with having to coddle players that aren't going to play to make sure they don't leave. So if they have to play at some point this season, I have to make sure that they're ready to, and feel like they're loved in the program.
Well, that'd be the thing. Like forever, Oregon, you guys play Fresno State, Boise State, programs like that. Obviously now Oregon State, who's not in the conference. Obviously those teams get paid to play Oregon, and it's a big deal for their program. But Boise State and Fresno State are gonna have a player or two that Dan Lanning's like, damn, I like that linebacker or that slot receiver. That'd be my first call. And what's that kid? How could that kid say no after the season?
Yeah,
those schools have no chance. They're like they're like the Tampa Bay Rays for the Yankees.
Which is why NIL is important, because the Boise State running back this year is really good, and he got a bunch of schools that called him, and he stayed in Boise because he got a big NIL deal to stay. A lot of times it's not about the most money; it's just about feeling loved, right? If you feel like you're Fresno, you're Boise State, and you're Oregon State now, Washington State, you just want to feel a little bit of love. I'm not sure you have to go anywhere for the money, but look, there are players that leave those schools that have spent 3 or 4 years there that just want to go get a paycheck for 1 year. Like, that's what the transfer portal has become now, which is totally fine. I don't, to be fair, I've never really liked the portal. I get the idea of like why it became a thing, John, but it wasn't intended for this, even though we all knew it was going to happen. It was intended for just guys to be able to freely transfer that weren't playing. It wasn't intended. I just saw a Twitter report
or a coach leaves.
Yeah, a coach leaves. I saw a report. Caleb Downs, who was the number 1 safety like 2 years ago in high school recruiting, transferred from Alabama to Ohio State. Like, they're putting him at running back in practice, supposedly. Who knows? I mean, I feel like Chip Kelly is probably, he's so happy at Ohio State. He's just like, yeah, play running back, buddy. Sure, I don't have to be head coach. Great. But like that type of player, I know Nick Saban left. So, but like that guy's not supposed to leave your school, right? A 5-star that was playing. It wasn't like he wasn't playing. Dylan Gabriel's not supposed to be in his 3rd school as Oregon's quarterback. That's not really what the portal is about. But that's what it came very quickly, because there's no regulations. There's nothing's going to change. And players now are just sort of mercenaries. And it's a really odd dynamic. Like, if you spent 4 years, like there's a running back that left Oregon, Travis Dye, who Oregon fans love, John. He won a Rose Bowl with Oregon. Like, he went to USC for a year. Unfortunately, got hurt at the end of the season. But like, he can't come back to Oregon. He's a USC grad now. You gotta like. It's just kind of. I think it's just sort of stinks for some of those players. You like, not burn your bridges, but you sort of discontinue your time with that team, and all of a sudden that's gone now. And you spent 1 year in a program, and I don't know. Like, do you feel that connection to that program after spending 6 months there? You probably don't.
See, and I know coaches bitch and moan, but I think Gabriel's a good example because they have, I forget the kid's name, but who's supposed to be their next like Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield. I think they basically told him like this kid's playing. But then he comes there and Dan Lanning gets the UCLA kid that they also wanted, the 5-star, who was pretty terrible last year, but it was tough circumstances. Like, let's use that as an example. I guess
I,
more the 5-star can't transfer anymore. Like he used up his one bullet in the
no,
gun, right?
no, you can transfer unlimited now.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So how do you massage that relationship if he thinks he's better than Dylan Gabriel in training camp?
And NIL. That's why.
You
Like
just pay
that.
him.
Yeah, that's what it is. But also too, like, so here's the thing about I think some of these programs like Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and this is what goes back to what we talked about, I think, at the beginning of the show, right? Is like if you're coming to those schools, you understand you're not guaranteed a spot because the talent is so grand at those places. Now, so Dan Lanning has to find players. Ryan Day has to find Kirby Smart has to find players that know that, right? Like you're not coming to our school and getting a free starting spot without earning your starting spot. And they're only taking players, John, that care about that. If you notice, not many players are leaving Georgia. Not many players are leaving Ohio State. Not many players are leaving Oregon. If they are, it's mostly the coaches called processing, right? They kind of like tell them like, you're not going to play. We need a spot for someone else. Please leave us. So they're taking Dante Moore and saying like, hey, buddy, look, you can come here. We want you to come, but listen, you're not playing this season. You might play next year, but guess what? We have a 5-star freshman coming in too. And that's part of coming to school in Oregon. And I think those schools are honest with the players. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like Dante Moore was tough last year, bad situation, rotating quarterbacks. The Bruin offensive line wasn't as good as it's been in the past. It wasn't the best offensive setup. I think he understands like too, like I wasn't ready to play last year. I can benefit from sitting a year. And we're seeing players now go to the NFL with 1 year starting experience. It was never that way. You needed 3 years, 4 years of starting experience to be drafted in the first round. You need anymore. He gets to play one season next year and go 11-2 and be a first round draft pick, John. So the dynamic of all that has changed now. And Georgia did too. They got Jaden Rashada from Arizona State, who was 5-star kid who now is going to be a backup there. Oregon did it as well. Makes sense, right? Dylan Gabriel goes down. Your team is loaded. You want to have a viable backup. Carson Beck goes down. Georgia's team is loaded. You want a viable backup. And the NIL stuff really keeps those players at those programs.
I would be very hesitant. I think we've learned in recent memory of breaking the bank for the blue chip quarterback out of high school. And that's one thing that's been hacked. You guys did it with Bo Nix. Washington did it with Penix. I mean, it's happened all over college football with the quarterback. Now, once they play a year and they want to transfer, you get a little film on them, like more. So you've seen some things, we need to work on this. You have a much better feel for it. But like Nebraska's getting a lot of credit, right, for Matt Rule. And Riola is supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. But we've all been around college football now for 20 plus years, and more than half of them never amount to shit, right? Or just underwhelmed given the hype, And some of them become top 10 picks, but it's a coin flip.
Well, that's why you recruit one every year, right?
Yeah, that's why you have to. You have to.
Another 5-star every year. I like Raiola. I'm curious, actually. Nebraska's interesting.
He looks fantastic if you just watch his YouTubes.
Because Matt Rule in year 2 at Temple and Baylor had those teams to 11, 12 wins in year 2. And so much tougher in the Big Ten, I think. So we'll see. Yeah, look, I think quarterback position feels like really the one that you're striking the most gold in the portal. Wide receiver a little bit as well, maybe a little bit of cornerback, but it's really hard in the trenches to find those players. There's only a couple, impact offensive linemen a year in the portal because those players just stay put at the school they're at. There's no reason to leave if you're that good. And so teams are, I think, pivoting back to having to recruit high school players at those positions.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get you out of here on this. Obviously, a story from a couple weeks ago, USC, LSU tried to back out of the game. Their roster clearly is nowhere near the heyday that most of us that talk about USC go back to the mid-2000s, and it's a different world. I mean, that team was no different than Saban's Alabama. I mean, they had pros at every position that were getting drafted, not like just drafted, like in the top 50 at every position, and then countless guys in the top 20. So, like, I don't have the breakdown of LSU's roster, but I think we can all acknowledge that that's got a chance to be pretty ugly. And I'm sorry, like, this isn't year one, this is year three. And if you get rolled by Brian Kelly, also in year three, who has the same excuses you do, new quarterback, new defensive coordinator, you're not playing at Baton Rouge at night either. This game's in Vegas, which essentially should be a USC home game, right?
Oh, it will be. I mean, that place will be full of USC fans. They tend to travel well, and you put Vegas in there, and God, Vegas had such a sports come up, man. Like, it's crazy. Like 10 years ago, it was like a barren desert of sports. Now you have a hockey team there. You got maybe I don't think actually the A's will ever show up, but you got a football team, a hockey team, all this college action every year. Lincoln Riley and USC is a good example, John, of how the portal can go badly very quickly for you, right? The portal for a school like USC should only be used to enhance your roster at certain positions. It cannot be used as a way to build up your entire roster. And USC went so hard in the portal. And again, those positions, offensive line and defensive line, you don't find those all-stars. It's really hard to find those guys. A lot of times those all-stars, by the way, John, are in two categories. One, they're injured, right? Like Latu, UCLA's pass rusher, was at Washington. He was medically retired and came back at UCLA. Or it's a lower level school kid, right? Oregon has a right tackle, Cornelius from Rhode Island. Like those guys that are
Jared Verse from Albany to Florida State.
So they're under recruited, or they just have a growth spurt late and they play really well, and they're just like they should be in Division I, but they're not, and boom, you pop up. But like if you're a second-year offensive lineman, you're transferring. Sorry, you're probably not good, right? Like you're not. And so USC got way too portal happy. And Lincoln Riley has admitted, like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have done that. It did not work out. But now you're in year 3, John, and you're going back to high school recruiting, which I like. USC is doing a better job in the 2025 cycle. But that's now you're like 3 years away from that coming to fruition. Like those players. So you're looking at what, 26 by the time like those interior players on offensive defensive line are like ready to like contribute at a high level. And so they just are really behind right now with talent. I mean, I'm looking at the roster right now. I mean, their center, maybe NFL player, left tackle's a redshirt freshman. I think he can be that player, but like wide receiver, this thing about Lincoln Riley's teams for years, Oklahoma, first round wide receivers every year. Not right now. Maybe defense. We talked about Pete Carroll's teams. Their backups got drafted. Their backups, John, that did not start, got drafted. Okay. USC's defense, the two best players, really, the three best players are transfers, which is funny. It's Bear Alexander, who's good, I think, and the two kids from Oregon State, the linebacker and the corner are both brothers. Otherwise, again, it's just a lot of like, But at USC, it shouldn't be that way. It's USC. You shouldn't be like, And like so, and even at quarterback, Miller Moss can be good. He played one in the bowl game. Jaden Mayava, maybe. I think is that San Diego State transfer? I think it's a UNLV transfer. Sorry. It's just the talent at USC is not what people expected it to be. Year 1, they won with Caleb Williams, better skill guys on offense in their schedule. No Oregon, no Washington. Like they didn't have those guys to play last year. And this year they had a much tougher schedule, and they went 7-5, 7-5, right? So their win total, I think, is 7.5 in Vegas.
And it was an ugly 7. I mean, they easily could have lost to Arizona. I mean, they probably should have lost that game.
Yeah, double overtime.
Yeah. You could argue the day and age of what Pete did, even the probably first half of Saban, is so over with the transfer portal and NIL. I mean, look at now. I mean, how many teams have a legit chance to win the national championship this year? 7?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking at like Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Oregon. I don't think Michigan's in that category right now.
Florida State or Clemson?
Yeah, but I don't. Clemson, I think they have mass question marks at quarterback, right? With Klubnik and DJU at quarterback. Florida State just lost. Michigan lost too much, in my opinion, to be a competitor for a championship. Look, if Kalen DeBoer, who's won everywhere he's at, I think you're looking at a guy who can, he's going to do well. There's a couple of like teams I think that
LSU would probably be pretty good.
Ole Miss is going to be good.
Yeah,
they went all in the portal this year too. Like they're going to be really good. They just haven't been able to kind of get over that Georgia Alabama hump. They haven't been able to beat those teams. So they're one team I think you seriously look at. No one in the Big 12, it feels like SEC or sort of Big 10 championship this year. But yeah, not many teams in most seasons I think are championship worthy.
Well, I know this: if Lane gets the playoffs, which if he goes 9-3 or 10-2, he'll be there. He's got, he from what I was told, he wanted the Oregon job. Obviously, he's got some off the field question marks in his past. They made the right decision with Dan Lanning, though Lane I think would have been fine too. I think he's got Florida written all over him as that disaster ends, don't you?
That or yeah, him or Jed Fish. They just Lane just seems to want out every year, right? He's just like, please get me out of here. Yeah, Florida, I could see that Florida. And then everyone says Jed Fish wants that job, but so everyone, I mean, I always love when the media says that, right, John? Like they want this job. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, great, but he's got to do well. I think at Washington, year one to have that job. Yeah, it will. Yeah, Lane's gonna. I mean, that team is. I don't think about their offense too. Like, I don't know if that's an offense that's like a championship winning style of offense that Lane runs Ole Miss. They score a ton of points, but I feel like some of these teams can beat him up in the trenches, which is sort of not how you win championships, obviously.
To me, if he gets to the playoffs and were to win a game, that would be a remarkable achievement for Ole Miss.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially where sort of again what they put in. They put a lot. People it's under the radar. Like they've put a lot. But Missouri actually might be pretty good too.
Yeah.
It's kind of a sleeper SEC team, I think. That might have a little bit of juice. Penn State, again, sort of the Ole Miss thing, like just can't beat Michigan and Ohio State. And that sort of is important to winning the Big Ten. We're nine Saturdays away now from college football being back. 10 Saturday, 9, 10, something like that. It's crazy.
Yeah, if you gave Lincoln Riley Penn State's roster, USC might be a problem.
Oh yeah, especially on that defense. Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you get out of here, Geoff. Have a good summer. Enjoy
Thanks, buddy.
The Charlotte humidity, and
talk
to you soon. It's coming.
100 this weekend, Saturday and Sunday.
Enjoy the pool.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. Take care.